what is leadership, what is a good leader versus a bad leader, and how can you improve on your skills in being a leader so that your organization is more effective. Today, we have John Burt with us. He's a Master Certified Executive Leadership Coach. He's been in the private sector for many, many years, and this is going to be a good one that you don't want to miss. Stay tuned. Hey, John, how are you?
Very good, Don. Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on the show because leadership is something that I think that every business person thinks about. We wonder whether we have it or not. I'm sure that most of us have glaring problems in our leadership skills, so don't laugh at me as we talk, okay? But I do love the topic, I really do, and I think this is going to be great for our viewers. So John Burt is a Master Certified Executive Leadership Coach, and he helps leaders at all levels to improve their self-awareness and leadership capabilities. And he enjoys talking about leadership and culture, which is what we're going to do today, thank goodness. I really mean it. I mean, this practice has been around for 20 years, and I think that you probably hear the same thing from people that you work with, but it's been a exercise in learning, and you learn a lot from your mistakes. And I think that, leadership is something that, I work on, and a lot of times I wonder whether I have it or not. I'm sure I have some of it, but I'm really interested to hear, what you have to say about leadership. So you have a BA in Behavioral Science from California State Polytechnic University, which I think is fascinating. I didn't share this with you, but I have a BA in Management.
Okay.
And I love psychology, and part of the management courses that I took discussed organizational behavior. Mm-hmm. And so with your degree, you went deep dive into that, right? And I'm sure that you still think about that all the time.
Indeed. I think, behavioral science, if I think back about it, I never would have imagined that I'd be using that as much as I did in my career as a management consultant. But it's really helpful in terms of understanding, the motivations of people and how they behave toward each other and maybe how they think about themselves.
Yeah. Would you say that that use of psychology and understanding of how organizations behave is a central component of being a leader or a manager, I should say?
I would tell you that most leaders, the key element, one of the key elements is self-awareness. And I think that perhaps my background in psychology, behavioral science has helped me to be more aware of my own behaviors and how I come across with people. I used to do a lot of work with reading self-help and how to be a better manager, how to be a better leader when I was coming up through the ranks. But I'm not sure that all leaders are nearly as self-aware. I think that they recognize when something doesn't go right. They can usually pick that up, but they don't really think, they don't have a reflective muscle that tells them, hey, listen, why did that go wrong? What could I have done better?
They don't study the film. They don't try to improve. They put the blame on other people, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Usually trying to find a reason, but perhaps it's not themselves and their own behaviors.
Okay. Well, you had some interesting jobs before you got into leadership coaching. You previously held management positions at such notable companies as General Dynamics, Ernst & Young, and IBM. And you actually retired from IBM.
I did, yeah.
That's cool. And do you think that besides your schooling, having those management jobs assisted you now, in your ability to help others and becoming leaders?
Yeah, I think for myself anyway, the on-the-job training was a big component. Being with leaders, even as a junior consultant when I was coming up, you're sitting in a room with people who are perhaps at a C level or VP level, and you're watching and you're observing. You're seeing what's working right. They're usually leading some organization or initiative, and you're just soaking that in terms of, is that the type of leader that I want to become?
Yeah. Right when we sat down, I had this epiphany, and you're going to laugh at this because it's such a simple thought, but there's leaders everywhere. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're good leaders, though.
Yeah.
Right? So there's good leaders and there's bad leaders, or there's mediocre leaders, right?
Right.
I mean, but there's lots of leaders out there, so it's not a matter of whether I'm a leader or, the person across the hall is a leader. It's what kind of leader are you, right?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people who have leadership positions, but are you leading, right? And you were mentioning earlier, do you have it or you don't? I think everybody has to some degree they have leadership skills, but leadership, indeed, what I'm learning is that leadership is a lifelong learning exercise, something you constantly have to improve on.
Okay, that's good to know. So how important is leadership in running a business?
Oh, I think it's depends on the size of the business. I think maybe you see with the size of your firm, the larger the firm, the more important leadership becomes. And as you start to have organizations that have multiple layers of leadership, it's important that the right culture is put into place, because you can't have direct line of sight on every single person, every single manager in your organization. You have to have both demonstrate strong leadership skills, but you also have to create the right culture within the organization so that when you're not there, right, when you're not directly leading.
You mean like when I'm going on vacation next week? For 1 week.
Hopefully you're not worried about that.
Hope that I come back and the business is still here.
There you go.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just think that culture is very important, and it's kind of hand in glove with the leadership of an organization as to whether or not people want to work there or come to work there, right? It's not only a recruitment element, but it's also their experience while they're there, as well as the retention element as well.
Okay. This is another very basic question, but I got to ask you this: is in your mind, is there a difference between having management skills versus leadership skills?
Yeah, it's a tough question. It comes up a lot. I will tell you that I think that the management skills are about doing things, right? It's about managing things in a process. I think the leadership is about managing people, right? The emotions and the behaviors of the people, and what the inspiration of the people are. You can manage a process. You can manage an accounting department, be super accurate on all your books, but you may have no culture, and the individuals who are working there may be miserable, maybe because of your management style. But leadership is about inspiring people and working with people.
Okay. Now, I remember this from my courses, is that there's a variety of types of managers. We even call them leaders in college, but you've got the dictatorial types, you got the democratic person, so would you agree that there's different types of leaders, and sometimes some types are better for certain organizations than others?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you expound on that?
Well, in my practice, one of the things I work with is something called the Enneagram. And it's a model that says that there are 9 different types of leadership traits. All of us have all 9, but usually there are 1 or 2 that stand out in terms of the way you behave. You could be a thinker, or you could be a driver, or you could be a helper. So these are different types of traits that are explained in the Enneagram, and each of them have their own characteristics. You'll have a blend or a mosaic of different leadership skills. But the one that stands out the most is what I call your go-to. This is going to be the one that's going to be the default. You have a new challenge, new situation. You're going to try to implement or use that style when you're trying to tackle that challenge. Sometimes that's a perfect fit. In other cases, that's not a good fit, and you wind up stumbling or derailing in those situations. So with my practice, what I try to do is help the leaders to develop skills and capabilities, maturity, if you will, around multiple traits, so they can basically blend or be agile around the
pivot, maybe
in terms of the type of leadership style they're going to use depending on the situation.
Okay, yeah, I remember that too from school. Is that with a company that is just performing poorly because people aren't showing up on time, and they're, the prior people weren't really asking them to do much, and then you get somebody in there that's a gangbuster, and they start like really dictating. Sometimes that's needed in certain organizations. Now, it's probably not a long-term effect. So what you're saying is that it's good for a leader to be able to exercise their various parts of their personalities and stuff, and depending on what's going on, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that there are also leaders for different types of context as well, as you can imagine. There are leaders that work great in a turnaround situation. There are others that work great in a steady state mode. But I would say that I find that unless a leader is very agile and has those different types of traits, it's going to be very difficult for them to manage through different types of situations with the business. Whether it be as you were talking about, you have somebody that comes in to do a turnaround. You have somebody, maybe there's an acquisition or a divestiture, or the company's in default or something like that. You wind up having to pull on different skills that you would rather than the ones you would in a steady state mode.
Okay, yeah. And businesses are cyclical in nature normally, and you're going to have good times and bad times, and so you need to be able to do that. Okay, so what are some of the common myths that people have about being a good leader?
So that's a good question. I would say one of the myths is, this idea that you have to be constantly the driver. You have to constantly be in control, have all the answers, and just be on all the time. I think that the leaders that I see today, the ones that are maybe a little bit more vulnerable, willing to show a little bit more the softer side, the empathy, the fact that they may not have all the answers, those are the leaders that I think are being more successful because they relate better to their people. People see maybe the faults and maybe the blemishes, and they say, okay, this is a real person, somebody I can relate to and I can get behind.
Okay. Now, I believe in team work. I have a sign that I created that I'm going to someday really post around here. Actually, I don't know if I will or not, but it's about how synergy really impacts a team. If you get the right people there and everybody's pulling and working as a team, that synergy creates way more than what any individual could do. And so, like in the law, in our practice, if we're taking on a complex case and I've got to prepare for a big trial and I've got the right people on the team and we're working as a team, we're going to perform really high. So there's that synergistic thing. And so leadership really plays into how good of a job you build teams, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things, I don't know if you read the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great.
I did.
But one of the things he talks about is making sure you have the right people on the bus. Because I believe in companies I've worked for, both worked for as an employee, but also companies that I've consulted to, you can have one or two bad apples that'll just bring everybody down. It creates dysfunction, a lack of trust. People are become more suspicious and less willing to kind of give you 100% if they feel as though that they're not working and they can't trust the people around them. So the teamwork and I think the trust that the leader places in the team members is important. But you have to have select good people to begin with, and then nurture them along the way.
Yeah. So culture is another thing that I know that you think is extremely important. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of culture first?
Absolutely. There's different elements of culture, right, for a company. I think that you have to start with the individual. Are you hiring people? Are you bringing people on? Do they have the capabilities, or are you training them to have the capabilities to do the job that you're expecting them to do? You think about another element of culture is, are people motivated to do that job? Are they motivated to extend beyond themselves, to maybe take risks in the organization? Do they feel comfortable that that organization will allow them to fail or to make minor mistakes, and that it's all part of the learning process? And then there's an element of culture which is the commitment to each other, to a common purpose and a common mission. Is that something that exists within a company? And then, of course, there's team and do you have team performance and individual performance metrics that you're driving people to? But culture is multifaceted. It does require the leaders, the top leaders in the organization, to drive it, to support it, and to encourage the individuals to speak out and to be part of that transformation.
Yeah, I remember from reading Built to Last and Good to Great that Jim Collins speaks about core values of a company and culture. We live in a time now where we've got remote workers. Even in this law practice, a lot of our attorneys are working from home, some of them more than others, and I don't think that we're unique. I think that you could see the emptiness of the commercial buildings, throughout the world now, that this is going on and it's never going to go away. So do you have any ideas about how leaders can maintain those core values and have a culture despite the fact that you might not see each other as much as you used to?
Yeah, I think you need to talk about it. It needs to be communicated. I think in many cases, if you look at the old way of doing work, right, you'd bring in an intern, maybe a new attorney in your setup, and basically they would work around experienced people. And just by being around the coffee machine or in the office all day or on a case, they'll learn what the culture is of the organization. And that used to be the case up until maybe the COVID, when really hybrid working or remote working became very, very, very popular, or maybe a necessity. But I think in today's environment, you have to be much more overt about it, and you also have to define it and discuss it and continue to repeat and communicate with people the culture that you want to have for the organization. Obviously then what follows in behind that is, do you practice it, right? So it's really a matter of setting it up. I was talking to a recent leader where we were talking. She's about ready to start a new job, and one of the pieces of advice I gave her is, as you start off, you don't have to necessarily know anything about the organization, right? Very little. You don't have to know any of the details, but you do need to get out in front and start talking about what your values are and what values you want to instill in the organization. That's an easy one, and it gives everybody an idea of what type of a person you are. And then, of course, you can follow that up with learning more about the organization and the details of whatever topic it is. But you start off by just letting people know what you believe in, what your values are.
Okay. So the job that you created for yourself is fascinating, and I think it probably a lot of people wish that they could be you. A lot of people that are in business and stuff. So, you've had the good fortune of working for some big companies, management positions. Now you're helping others. So can you talk about, the type of clients that you have?
Absolutely. So one of the things I learned when I was working in industry, as much of what I was doing was I was consulting on a particular, process area or a particular topic. But along the way, when you're working with the executives and the teams, you're also working on developing them as well. So the idea of leadership development and talking about leadership and how to implement change and how to implement the right culture was really actually just part of the job, is what I did. I also had the benefit of seeing great leaders in terms of how they led their organizations, some of these very large organizations, and how they were successful, or perhaps maybe where I thought some of the weak points were. So I've incorporated that all into my leadership philosophy and my coaching philosophy in terms of how I do that. When I first started off, I thought it was going to be relatively easy. Identifying clients and selecting clients, getting clients on board. But it's actually a little bit more difficult than that, in the sense of trying to find the clients that are really going to benefit from coaching. Like I said before, Don, is that client needs to want to learn. If you find somebody who wants to become a better leader, they're going to be much more open and receptive to what you're talking about and the whole process. I think you have to have somebody who probably has experienced some of the issues firsthand and starts to know where they're getting stuck. There are a lot of people who are really just don't have any sort of self-awareness. They get into conversations with you and they say, well, I don't know, do I need leadership training? And I say, well, if you don't think you need it, you probably don't need it.
I would think the opposite. If you don't think you need it, you probably need it.
You probably need it, but you won't be open to it.
Right.
You won't benefit. I mean,
right.
and maybe that's the key for me, is that I went from thinking everybody needs it to really trying to evaluate whether or not somebody is going to benefit from it.
Okay.
Right. And not everybody will benefit from it.
So reading your background, you spent a lot of time overseas working in management positions. Did you see any differences in the people over there versus American corporations as how they run things? I know that the thought that most of us Americans have is man, I wish I lived in Europe. I could take off 2 months out of the year and basically they'll let you go home whenever you want and all that. So tell us what reality looks like, and is there any difference?
Well, I worked in Europe. I was based in the Netherlands, but I worked in various countries around Western Europe for about 10 years. And it wasn't until probably the fourth or fifth year that I was there, I think I took a 3-week vacation, maybe 2.5-week vacation. All my colleagues were applauding me because they said, John, you finally get it. You're going to start to live like a European. But I will tell you that things are a little bit different. And I think it's probably, in terms of maybe a lot has to do with history, but there's a lot more collaboration that goes on within leadership teams, a lot more consensus building that goes on within leadership teams. It's in the U.S. really typically a leader is given the charge of their team or their piece of the organization, and they're kind of given carte blanche to run it as they want, as long as they don't hit any of the major guardrails. But in Europe, one of the things that I learned with working in the Netherlands was something called the polder model, where they make decisions that are based upon the benefits to the organization, the employees, and the society as a whole. So they always think about that as a triad.
Wow.
In terms of how decisions are made. And if you're going to do a reduction in force or lay off people, you have to do it in a kind way that doesn't disturb the basic framework of the the nation as a whole. In the U.S., we could let people go and unless you're triggering some sort of a 50 or more where you have to do a pre-notification, there isn't much thought about it. Somebody will just lay people off and they'll go off and find a job somewhere else. Well, in these smaller countries, there's much more collaboration. There are I would say much more concern about making sure that there's harmony in the decision making. So there's that type of a change management element that goes with it.
Okay, and which model do you like better?
Well, now that I've been there for 10 years, and I went through the pain of learning how to really adapt and appreciate all the different cultures. And in most cases, most of my projects that I worked on did not rely on the workforce of one country. I had to bring consultants in from multiple countries. So I was constantly trying to make sure that we had harmony amongst different cultural values across the team. I think at one point, one of my projects had 19 different countries represented, 19 different cultures represented on the team. And the team worked out really, really well. But it took me a while to understand, the importance of culture. And probably why I harp on it today is because I realized how important that is in terms of getting teams to work effectively and work with each other. If everybody on the team understands their role, everybody on the team understands how they're and feels valued for their contribution and that we're open to the contribution, the team can outperform and just really, meet goals you would never have imagined.
Cool. That is cool. So I'm envisioning you coming over to my office with a doctor's bag, right? And you standing right behind my chair, and I'm making phone calls, and you're saying, "No, Don, don't do that." And you're there constantly whispering in my ear and telling me that, I should be doing something by Tuesday. And basically, you're a teacher, and I've got homework assignments. So that's not how it really works, right?
No.
How does it really work when you take on a new client? How does your process, your relationship start with them?
It usually starts with some sort of a discovery session where I'm learning about them. I'm learning about their situation, their background, kind of like what motivates them. What do they feel they're successful at? What do they think that gets them stuck in their day-to-day work in their environment? Generally, if it's maybe that same session or a second session where we're talking about what are their specific goals for the coaching, coaching sessions that we're going to have together. Just to understand that we're on the same page, and if I can figure out whether or not I feel like my background and my experience will help me to advise them as a coach and help me to coach them. There may not always be a great match, depending on what that person is looking to do. But if there is, and we go through those first couple of sessions, that gives me the background to be able to kind of understand what are their motives. Getting back to our behavioral science question, understanding what are their basic motives. Maybe what's their thought process? What are their mindsets that are behind the way they think about themselves and in terms of their leadership capabilities and maybe lack thereof, but also how they interact with others on their team. So that's really sort of how you get started. I like to very quickly pivot to some sort of self-assessment, right? I know everybody has gone through and probably says that they've taken some sort of a self-assessment. So that's great. But so I usually just say, listen, take this one. Let's see if it matches up to everything you've told me up to this point, as well as your view of yourself, right? So I have a couple of different tools that I use. Some are proprietary. Most of them are commercially available. But it just gives the individual an idea of what are their primary traits, where are they strong versus the kind of the pool or the reservoir of data that's there.
And this is going really to the heart of the self-awareness that you started this discussion with, right?
Indeed. What I find is that some people are really interested in these results. Some they'll really dive in deep and they'll be asking very specific questions. Others are like, yeah, pretty much matches up with what I thought about myself. I always think it's a little bit, it's more interesting to deal with somebody who's like really started to think about it. How does it measure up? What are the different strategies for improvement? Or do they come back and say, this is absolutely right. This is exactly where I'm getting stuck in my current role, or I've gotten stuck in previous roles that I've had.
How much time do you usually spend, let's say, per month, with the clients? I'm sure it
It can-
varies somewhat, but
It can vary. I think that sometimes people, their busy schedules. If I was to coach you, you have a very busy schedule. So it's usually like every other week. Some clients I have which are every week. It really depends on their availability. Right now, I'm kind of almost at the limit in terms of what I could do effectively, because I want to be able to make sure I can prepare and have that thought before and after the session with them. But for the client themselves, usually I think anything more than a week, like every week, is maybe that's about the limit for them. And then if there's if I'm invited to their place of work to shadow them during the day, it could be a week that I spend with them in their offices, just trying to observe and see how that measures up with how their view and how they believe that they're showing up for their people.
Cool. So how would somebody learn how to contact you? And where's John Burt? Are you on the internet, I'm sure, or what?
Well, it's actually pretty easy now. I just redid my website, so it's johnburtleadership.com. So it's very easy.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
It is pretty easy. So it gives you an idea of the types of services that I offer. It's one-on-one coaching. It's leadership team coaching. I do work on culture in terms of cultural consulting with organizations. I've done workshops and speaking, engagements with clients depending on what their needs are.
Awesome. So I'm going to shift the topic just a little bit here. So as you know, we both are members of the board for the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce, and I previously was the chair of the Economic Summit, but I've been displaced by somebody that's better than me, you. Okay.
I'm filling big shoes.
So anyways, we got a really interesting one coming up. It's in October. What's the date? Do you know right off the top of your head?
I believe it's the 17th.
The 17th. Okay. Tell us about what people could expect if they attend that.
Okay. Well, this is a great event. I think it's probably the premier event that we do, because, Chamber of Commerce, we're all about developing our members' businesses. And this is a particular event. I think we try to blend in this event. We have 3 speakers that are going to show up. And one of the speakers is going to talk more of a global economic view, both at the kind of the international, national, and then regional level.
Kind of the state of the economy?
State of the economy, right? So kind of telling you what are the major factors. I think that, in the past year, we've heard everything from recession to, inflation,
yeah.
all these different topics that have people worried. So we wanted to bring in somebody that could really give people, tell people how it really is. We also have Dave Klug from the city of Pasadena, who's going to come in and actually talk about some of the initiatives that are going on right here in Pasadena. So even if you're not interested in what's happening at the international level, if you're running a business here in Pasadena, you most likely are very interested in what's going on here in Pasadena. So we're looking forward to Dave doing that. And then we decided we wanted to, as you know, we talked a lot before about this, Don, is that we wanted to pick a topic that was of interest to, we think, all the members. So we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. What is it? What is it used for? How can you use it? And maybe what are some of the myths and some of the facts that you should know about it? But also how you can make sure that you're utilizing this really powerful tool to the best of your ability.
That is so exciting. I could tell you, it scares me. AI scares me, but I'm sure that when we walk out of there, I'm going to feel at least a little more comfortable with the topic. But yeah, this is going to be a good one. And so this is going to be held where?
It's going to be at the Altadena Country Club. So it is on the 17th. We're going to have a kickoff at 11:30. I think we run for 90 minutes.
Starts at 11:30?
Starts at 11:30. The cost is $75 per person, and the parking is free. So I understand that's a big benefit for folks. We are co-hosting this with the city of Pasadena. So together, David is pulling the resources for the city. Obviously, this is something that we want to do for our members and for our citizens. People are running businesses here in Pasadena. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, I think we should encourage people to attend. If you're a member of the chamber, or even if you're not, I think that this is something, in the past, I've always loved it. Like you, I think it's the very best that the chamber has to offer, because you're getting some insight that if you're able to think abstractly, at least, it could help you. It could help you in your business or your management, knowing what's going on. You were talking about the local stuff that happens. But it's really you can kind of make your decisions and know trends and things like that. And the economy thing, last year, I think it's the same speaker, is from Wells Fargo. He really allayed a lot of my nervousness last year by talking about what the recession was. I never understood why the Fed increases interest rates, what they're trying to accomplish and everything. That was really fascinating. And so this year, I'm sure he's going to have just a better even presentation because we've got different components of it. So I guess at the end here, I just want to join you in pushing this thing, because it will be sold out, by the way, so if people want to join this thing, they should go on the Chamber website, I think, right, and do it. And you could buy tables for your companies as well. So I look forward to doing it with you.
It's going to be fantastic, and I appreciate working together with you, somebody who's already accomplished this, made put together something like this, because I think it's really going to be fascinating for our members.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John Burt, this has been wonderful having you here today. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot about leadership, and I hope that a lot of people here also found this to be fascinating because you just opened my eyes up as to the different components of it. It was really great.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us.